Welcome to Red Sari's presentation today. We have R.K. Nandyal and Lori Nandyal with us to present on yoga and your health. And I would like to introduce R.K. as he is known and is going to be known throughout this presentation. I am Rama Kasturi. I am the host of, I'm the moderator for the meeting today and the president of Red Sari Cincinnati. And I would like to thank both RK and Lori for taking the time to present this webinar to our participants. So welcome everybody as well. And RK Nandyal was born in Andhra Pradesh and practiced yoga under Sri UV Krishnaya. He worked for the telecom industry for over 2 decades and accumulated, besides accolades, as he says, a whole host of diseases such as seasonal asthma, joint and spine issues, and anxiety. And unlike some of his colleagues who developed more serious health issues, one died of a heart attack, unfortunately, as he documents. Dr. Nandyal survived his corporate career in relatively good health for 2 reasons. One, he has had a lot of help from a functional medicine physician who he actually happens to live with and is married to, who specializes in root cause analysis. And 2, he fell into the practice of comprehensive traditional yoga. His wife, Lori Nandyal, is a board-certified family physician with University of Cincinnati. Her areas of specialization include functional medicine and women's health. Lori attended Wyoming, Ohio High School and received her bachelor's and medical degrees from the University of Cincinnati. The Nandyals have 3 daughters, and in 2014 they founded Yoga Leela, a community practice. And the practice not only postures and flows to benefit the spine and the major joints, but also uses mindfulness techniques that connect yoga to spiritual principles such as justice, gratitude, forgiveness, and so on. Yoga Leela's focus in community wisdom is based on the yogic principle that just as healthy plants need healthy soil, healthy individuals need healthy communities. Namaste. And before I go on, I would like to state why we are presenting this particular webinar today. This presentation is aligned with Red Sari's mission, which is to promote a healthier and happier lifestyle for South Asians and anybody else who's watching. Our vision is to improve the overall health and well-being of South Asians through outreach efforts such as our webinar series and education efforts designed to implement a comprehensive strategy of healthy diet, moderate exercise, good sleeping habits, and excellent mental health. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the floor to our guests and our speakers and our presenters tonight, RK and Lori, but I would just like to remind our participants of a few housekeeping rules with respect to Zoom. Please note that your lines are muted. You can submit questions at any time by using the chat window. And please hold your questions to the end of the presentation, and we will make every attempt to have all of your questions answered. The webinar will run approximately for 1 hour and is being recorded. And today's discussion session will be recorded and made available on Red Sari's Facebook and YouTube channels. And breaks are not scheduled. If you feel the need to take a break, please feel free to excuse yourself. So welcome everybody on behalf of Red Sari Cincinnati. Thank you, Lori and RK, and please take it away.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much for having us, Rama, Shakti, and Lata. We love the mission of Red Sari in terms of serving the wellness needs of the South Asian community. And we know, although South Asians are in the forefront in many fields, oftentimes they're not great at taking care of their own health. And so it's very important to have organizations like this that cater to the South Asian community, and we know that we have issues with hypertension, we have diabetes issues, and so so this particular community does need some wellness education along with all the stresses that they take on as a minority community, and also sometimes the additional stress placed on this community is to be a model minority, not just any minority. And so we expect our children all to do well, and so we put a lot of stress on them. So yoga fits in well with the mission of Red Sari. So we are very, very honored to be part of this event today. I wanted to kind of start with what yoga is not. A lot of people think what yoga is acrobatics, such as like Pulasana, or when you do Mayurasana, where for example you balance yourself, and that is just a tiny part of yoga. So real yoga happens in the mind, and so if we don't do a comprehensive yoga, if we just do the acrobatics, then we would only be able to do that, those kinds of acrobatics for a while, and then after a while, our joints will not cooperate, and there's nothing else to do. And before I share the screen with our presentation, I wanted to see if Lori wanted to say anything about your interest in yoga.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So as a physician, especially one who's been trained in looking for root causes, and one of my slides will kind of clarify that, I think it's so important to understand what contributes to creating health. And in my 20 years of doing yoga, I definitely see the impact, and it is one of those many things that I do recommend to my patients, many of whom are now students largely, in terms of their own wellness, and mental health is part of that. So yoga is just, it's such an ancient tradition and an ancient practice that brings so much wisdom and embodiment of centeredness and balance. So that is, I think, an excellent tool to pass on.
And Lori's been doing yoga for 20 years or more, and for part of that time, she was primarily doing kind of studio yoga style yoga, and then so we had a lot of discussions, and finally we decided to start community yoga, more authentic yoga, community in Cincinnati called Yoga Lila. And so now I'm going to share my presentation. Hopefully you're able to hear Lori okay. And so sharing my screen. And I'm going to put this in presentation mode. So our title today is Eastern Healing for Modern Minds, and I won't go into detail on what I mean by Eastern healing because it's kind of modified, or it's the modified title of my book, which goes into Eastern healing in terms of Eastern focus on the inside rather than the outside. And so there's a whole lot of detail where we go into Asian traditions, not just Indian tradition. So Rama already covered who the speakers are, but I wanted to emphasize that we come to you today not as arrogant experts on this topic, but rather in the Bhikshu tradition of ancient India, where we are like beggars coming to share with other beggars where the food is. And that kind of humility is what yoga requires, not any sense of And even in terms of Ayurveda, I had some training from my teacher, but my expertise or my knowledge is very little compared to my teacher. Partly because I was too busy making a living as a telecom engineer, and only now I'm kind of getting back to my roots. So Yoga Leela Community, we started in 2014 as an authentic alternative to commercialized Western yoga. And we decided to call it Leela, partly because, Leela means play in Sanskrit, partly because Leela is Lori's name in India, because Lori in India means a truck. And no one, she did not want to be, associated with a truck in India. So basically, while visiting India, her favorite name was to call herself as Leela. And so this is partly named after her. So I also want to mention that we want to make this accessible to all, unlike studio yoga, which because of the money that they expect, the fees that they expect from people, oftentimes they choose their demographics to be, a certain economic and racial, segment of the society. And we wanted to kind of open it up and also take it to inner city Cincinnati. We've done some work in Avondale. And so that's that's been our goal, and we hope to get back to it after COVID. And now the meaning of yoga is connection. Yukta is the original Sanskrit word, and love, justice, gratitude, forgiveness, etc. are connections, and hate, bigotry, lack of gratitude, lack of forgiveness, these are disconnections. And we create oneness when we increase our connections and decrease our disconnections. So that's a little in a nutshell, the meaning of yoga, not the acrobatics. And so here I'm going to give the microphone to Lori, maybe. Yeah, that way people can hear you better.
He says I mumble, so I don't want to. All right. Well, as a physician, certainly we are taught about the stress response, stress chemistry, just a depiction here of the brain and the fine wiring that we all possess. We've all experienced stress of the immediate sort, the acute sort of stress. This would be seeing a snake and running away from it, or when you're driving a car and someone swerves in front of you and you have that immediate, it's momentary, it's moments, just seconds, microseconds of acute reaction to something stressful. The response to more chronic stress is really no different. We are hardwired the same way, and that reaction, we may not perceive it as that heart rate increase, that sweat, that surge of like panic, but it is still there with that same chemistry that goes on. We use the name parasympathetic and sympathetic, sympathetic being that flight or fight reaction when you're all of a sudden geared up to run away from danger. But again, with chronic stress, we behave the same way. Whereas the opposite of that is what we call the parasympathetic or rest and digest response. So these are two sides of a coin, both important. We must be wired to get away from danger, but we must return to baseline and allow our body to seek a quiet, I call quietude, finding some respite from that stress. This depiction really sort of indicates, let's say in the green where you have an acute stress, and ideally you would come back to baseline. But if you are interrupted before returning to baseline with another stress, and then thereafter another stress, you can see how the red depiction is your curve shifts to the right. You may not actually come back down to baseline. This is, again, a stress chemistry where we must, in and of ourselves, find a way to reset, to slow down, to take a breath, even if it's just 3 breaths. And yoga is one of those ways beautifully built to bring us back to a baseline. In my functional medicine training, we really go to the roots of the problem. And those roots include relaxation, working on relaxation, working on exercise and movement, stress modification, and relationships, what we call community. So basically, yoga builds all that again beautifully together. It's one of those multitasking, unitasking things that we can do. And then in a healthy community, we're also talking to our colleagues, to our co-yogis, about eating well and using that tool in addition. So we don't eat during yoga, but it is part of a healthy process. So I'll turn it back over to my hubby now.
So how would we define authentic yoga approach? It is basically to include movement, meditation, breathing discipline, and community all together. And if any one of these is missing, then it is not comprehensive yoga. So also there's a little joke that I share, it kind of half humorously. Western yoga is to authentic yoga, real yoga, what French fries are to French cooking. They have very little in common. So we do a little bit of acrobatics and we call it yoga, but yoga has a lot more to it, not only including all four of these. So let's take a look at what else authentic yoga has. So the previous slide is a more secular view of yoga. This one is more spiritual view of yoga, where your yoga kriya, your yoga activity, is supposed to be based on the four legs of bhakti, jnana, raja, and karma. Bhakti is devotion, jnana is wisdom. Some people think jnana is knowledge, but vijnana is knowledge, jnana is wisdom. Raja is concentration, which is like meditation, and karma is justice. So someone like Gandhi did not do much yoga, but he would be a karma yogi. He was a yogi of justice. And so movement is meditation. When does movement become meditation? When you try to bring in physical and metaphysical together. So just looking at the physical aspect, spine needs to be involved. And I come from an exact science background, so for me, I look at spine as a nerve center, and nerves as being like electrical wires. And if I had enough funding, I would research what happens in yoga to the electrical impulses in your spine, such as once the electrical wiring gets activated, is there line loss? Is there impedance? Is there conduction? All the things that electrical engineers would apply to electrical wiring, how much of that applies to the spine when it comes to yoga is something that I'm interested in. And joints and muscles are also involved in the physical aspect. And breathing, Lori will go more in depth into breathing later on, so I'll be going to skip breathing. And balance, of course, balance is dependent on how much sleep you got or didn't get last night. Some studies have linked balance to vitamin B12, I believe, and of course, your hearing is involved, eyesight is involved. So balance is a very, very complex phenomenon. In fact, we have Dr. Bhattacharya on the call. He is he's done great research at the University of Cincinnati on balance. In fact, one particular research project that he shared with our group is about how yoga can help firefighters balance better on their jobs. For them, if they lose balance, that it's a life or death question. And so, I would like to again look into things like that, how to help firefighters with yoga, with their balance and everything. And on the metaphysical side, we have the 3 E's of every posture: earth, which in Sanskrit is called pusthiti, and second one is equilibrium, samasthiti, and the third one is ease, vidamastiti, And I call it Vedamastiti cortisol management. That's where you get to manage your stress. At the end of every pose, you relax, and it's like a mini vacation that you take. And then in terms of spiritual principles, again, we talked about all the connections that we need to incorporate into our poses. Every pose, every posture, every vinyasa has a meaning to it, and we're supposed to feel that meaning. We have a little bit of a thunderstorm going on here. Lori will go close the door. So moving on to Lori's slide now on breathing. I'll give the microphone back to her. So in yoga, we train people to breathe through your nose. The nose is the primary organ for breathing, not the mouth. So mouth breathers, as my teacher used to call them, need to be discouraged, and we need to learn to breathe unless we have some issue, some obstacle in our nose that prevents us from breathing through our nose. So I'll let Lori speak.
Just to carry that thought on a little bit further, we know that some studies are showing how the nasal passageways actually demonstrate less resistance to airflow than oral airflow. So in other words, more ability to get humidification for the air that's flowing through the nose. It's a filter. Duh, we're supposed to be breathing through our nose. Our mouth is not a filter. And so thereby reducing some of the germs. It's kind of like a first pass, whereas we don't have quite that same screening ability when we breathe through our mouths. There are increasing data on how nasal breathing actually improves that relaxation process. And the fourth thing there is nitric oxide production when one's breathing through the nose, so that blood vessels dilate and there's some more relaxation through that dilatory effect of those blood vessels. So nasal breathing, for some, is very natural. For others of us, I don't know, we're more prone to breathe through our mouths. So I have some tools and techniques that I use for myself to try to keep my mouth closed at night and emphasize nasal breathing. But during yoga, consciously, I can certainly focus on my nasal breathing. And I think it's wonderful when we're moving as we change our different flows and the different segments of those flows in yoga to kind of breathe in and breathe out, and then really focusing on that being nasal. So here again, the science behind the way we breathe can also improve our ability to get the more benefits from the yoga.
And I also want to emphasize diaphragmatic breathing, breathing all the way into your tummy and breathing all the way out of your tummy, rather than just the upper chest, puffy, stressed breathing. So I, to my students at least, I emphasize that they need to be breathing fully, full breaths rather than partial breaths, and that way you bring in the maximum amount of oxygen to fill the 4+ liters of space in your lungs, and you take out the maximum amount of carbon dioxide, thereby detoxifying the body. And when the oxygen comes in, it energizes not just the cells of the body, but also the brain. Some people claim that they can think better after yoga also. And that's partly because of the breathing. If they're not breathing right during yoga, I'm pretty sure that it's not helping them think better. And so, community aspect. Why does yoga need a healthy community? Brahma in the introduction mentioned that there is a yogic premise that just as a healthy plant needs healthy soil, a healthy individual needs a healthy community. So conversely, we need to work hard to create a healthy community in terms of justice, clean air, water, and food. And otherwise, working solely on individual health will fail. So right now, one image that I've seen in functional medicine, on a functional medicine site, is that of a spigot that's running, and physicians are out there mopping up, all the water on the floor. So until we turn the spigot off, until we turn the faucet off, we are going to be flooded. And that's why it's so important that we need to think about creating wellness, not just about treating illness. And each individual needs to think of this, not just physicians. Now, I wanted to share a little bit about the importance of joints. Joints are called sandhi in Sanskrit. And so whenever people get into fitness, and I have a lot of fitness students, mostly at YMCA, these are weightlifters. So they lift like 300, 400 pounds of weight. And for them, muscles are something superficial that you can see, that you're healthy by just looking at the muscles. And for me to convince them that joints are very important, because joints are foundational and joints are the focus of wellness. It's been really, really hard. And there was a little video that I would like to share, and this doesn't have any sound to it, but you can see how in yoga the various joints move as you're doing yoga poses. And so maybe, okay, it's starting now. I may need to share that slide. I'm trying to go back to the original presentation.
You have to share this one, and then that's going to take too much time, I think.
So Shakti, how do I get back to the from this screen?
You have to unshare the one you were in, right?
Okay, so I can see this. It went into the wrong page.
Want to stop the share?
So I can stop this. It also went into the. I shouldn't have started that. So graphic options. Okay, so now I got it back. Except I want to start that screen that I.
You're on.
Okay, so
Never mind.
anyway, there's a beautiful video. It's called Yoga Skeleton. If you could see it on YouTube, I was trying to run that, but it kind of got stuck there. And now let's talk about the spine a little bit. So spine, in terms of yoga, is the dance. Yoga is the dance of the spine between the earth and the sky. And the Sanskrit word for spine is the same thing as lineage, Vamsam. So it's very interesting that it's almost like just as each vertebrae is stacked on top of another vertebrae, we have. I'm sorry, the YouTube is still running in the background. I need to turn the YouTube off. Okay, so hopefully I still got you.
We're way back on.
Okay. Sorry, that YouTube thing, we practiced, but it didn't work. So breathe. So we went through this. So the spine is actually the extension of the brain. So a lot of people think, especially some of my fitness students, think that you have the brain, and then you have the neck, and then you have the spine. But the neck is essentially, it's also known as the C cord or the C spine. It is, the neck is the cervical part of the spine. And so the neck starts at the base of the skull, or the spine starts at the base of the skull and goes all the way to the tailbone. And as you can see in this picture, it's connected directly to the brain, and it's studied as part of neurology. And essentially, the spine is part of the brain system. It should be looked at as part of the brain, and Ayurveda recognizes that. And so in Ayurveda, oftentimes one way of complimenting someone on good health is she has a good spine. Whereas in the West, a spine means the spine is a metaphor for courage. Whereas in Ayurveda, spine is a metaphor for good health. So our ancient folks, Asian folks, I was told by a friend of Chinese extraction, even in Chinese medicine, it is the spine is the center of health in many ways. And the core in yoga is vertical, it's not horizontal. So abs are not the core, but rather it's like an apple core. The core is the musculature that supports the spinal column, which encases the spinal cord. And so keeping the spinal column in good health through yoga is very important, because I let Lori talk about this.
Okay. So again, just to the point that yoga is one of the best practices for actually helping with particularly low back pain, and many of us have suffered low back pain. When one is in chronic pain, it's the focus. It's hard to do anything. It's stressful. It's one of those things that when you're in chronic pain, you just cannot necessarily come back down to baseline when we go back and think about the stress chemistry. So imagine being in chronic pain, never being able to be in a really relaxed state of mind, but doing yoga, helping with back pain, other mindfulness practices, helping to reduce pain, can all be enhanced through a yoga practice and a yoga mindset. So I think just sharing that study is one of the reasons for that slide there.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was spine as a nerve center. As you can see, the majority of the nerves in the body, except for the 12 cranial nerves, the majority of the nerves go through the spine. So in Sanskrit, the spine is called Nadi Kendra. It is another synonym for it. A Nadi Kendra is the center of force, nerves. And if you take good care of your spine, if you take good care of your spinal column, then neurologically you're healthy. So, and we're going to share a few exercises quickly, and also a few principles of yoga, very simple things. So forget all the acrobatics, and then we'll be sharing those things soon. I wanted to spend a little bit of time about a lot of my students read something about Kundalini and Tantra, and they come to me and say, what does yoga have to do with Kundalini? What is Kundalini yoga? And what is the connection between yoga and the spine and sexual health? And again, Ayurveda recognizes sexual health as an integral part of wellness. And so you're not fully well if you're sexually unhealthy. So, especially we'll be looking at this after colonial invasions, India has actually become more puritanical. And so the land of Kama Sutra and Ananga has now become as puritanical as 17th century Great Britain in some ways. And so people need to understand that sexuality is very much part of a human being. It is nothing to be ashamed of. The shame that gets associated with it is completely unhealthy. And so spine needs to be activated for sexual wellness, and sexuality is not just again Indian tradition or Asian tradition. Sexuality is also connected to creativity. So so basically, the more energized your spine is, the more creative you are. You're able to think better, like we talked about, and then maybe produce great poetry. Build great sculptures. All of that in Ayurveda is rooted in Kundalini, and Kundalini is essentially feminine energy or goddess. There's two great ways of describing the spine in terms of Tantra. One is Sukha Sopanam. It is the staircase of pleasure, and it goes from the sacral region to the brain. And the other one is Sukha Sopanam is one. What is the other one?
With blocking begin.
We're blocking that part with these windows. But anyway, so it is essentially you can almost see how Kama Sopanam is the staircase of desire, is another way Tantra describes the spine. And then the Sanskrit word for neurology is Tantrika Sastra. So neurology itself is seen as related to Tantra. Tantra is related to the spine and in some ways the sexual energy. That is also known as creative energy of a person. I just wanted to spend maybe a couple of minutes quickly on the origins of yoga. A lot of the folks here you already know a lot about this, but I want to share this not because this is anything original, but because I want you to have a couple of connect the dots moments, like aha, these two I never connected. So that's what I'm hoping you would find in these few slides. When I'm writing my book on yoga, I had to kind of divide yoga into pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial yoga. By the way, pictures like this kind of always center me because anytime I'm putting on airs, I remember what my ancestors had to go through so I could be here. So that's the colonial period. So there's a pre-colonial period. Some people would say pre-colonial period even started before Alexander invaded India. But some people would say pre-colonial period would be any time before Middle Eastern invasions. And post-colonial, of course, starts in 1947. So if you're writing a book on various postures of yoga, where do you find them? If you want to have a comprehensive set, the Iyengar textbook is not enough. And with all due respect to my relative, you have to go to temple sculptures. And temple sculptures, have a lot of yoga postures in them. And unfortunately, the majority of temples of ancient times have been either destroyed or in a dilapidated condition, like this temple in Uti in Tamil Nadu. And it's very hard to decipher the yoga poses from some of these, and a lot of yoga poses have been defaced. So when armies invaded, the first thing that they attacked was cut off people's noses, these murtis noses, or they would entirely take a chisel to them. So another great source of yoga asanas is Indian classical dance, Bharatanatyam or Odissi, or every region of India has a classical dance. And yoga is incorporated. During colonial period, yoga went dormant and got for some reason, people did not look down on Indian classical dance as much as they looked down on yoga. A lot of civil servants during the British Raj would look at yoga and say that kind of voodoo, that's a bunch of garbage. Why are you practicing it? But somehow, if you do it in dance, people tolerate it. And so anyway, a lot of Prabha Nair is not here, but she and I talked a lot about how many poses yoga and Bharatanatyam have in common. So here's another thing. I don't want to go into YouTube again, but so there's a lot. If you can watch this, this is on YouTube. If you Google Natyam and Sandhya Raju, this will come up. And sometime when you have time, you can see beautiful, yoga postures, integrated into Indian classical dance. Now, in terms of yoga traditions, I was born into a Vaishnava tradition. So for us, certain yoga asanas such as Anjaneyasana, Anantasana, and when we talk about goddess, we thought of God, the goddess of abundance, which is Lakshmi. And another name for goddess of abundance is Rama. And we have a couple of Ramas here. And Vaishnava tradition is always emphasizing karuna, be compassionate to others. And it's propagated by gurus. And even today you have gurus going all over India and then teaching their own style of spirituality, and some come over to the United States and in fact, yoga came to the United States during the 1950s, and it was brought by gurus like Yogananda, Paramahamsa, and others. But the Shaiva tradition never came to the West. Why not? Because it's primarily practiced by sadhus. These sadhus don't travel abroad. They go from river to river doing, what are known as melas. Kumbh melas is another name for it. And they are supposed to be, in many ways, the storage banks of great yogic secrets. And much of yoga that they practice is tantric, and they emphasize justice. They even carry that Trishul, the trident, like the Shiva's, a weapon of choice. And so Shaiva tradition is very much underrepresented in today's world. But my teacher combined Vaishnava and Shaiva together, and it's called not Smart Yoga, but Smarta Yoga. And so Smartas are both Vaishnavas and Shaivas, and so they care about compassion as well as justice. And the shloka that we were trained on, the translation goes like this. Justice without compassion is but vengeance, but compassion without justice is hypocrisy. So we need both compassion and justice. And so if I see a woman being raped or a massacre going on, if I don't speak up, and if I'm compassionate toward both the oppressor and the oppressed, then there's something wrong with my humanity. I need to speak up. I need to do something about injustice in the world, and that is essentially, the sadhu, and the tantric Shaiva tradition. I wanted to also say a little bit about the importance of the goddess for authentic yoga. Male-centric Abrahamic desert phase, basically as they moved all over the world, they destroyed the goddess. So, goddess Athena of Greece disappeared. Diana of Italy disappeared. Isis of Egypt. Morgana. If you meet a woman named Morgan, she's not named after anything in the Bible. She is named after Morgana, the Celtic goddess of Ireland. And all these goddesses disappeared, from everywhere in the world, wherever Abrahamic faiths, mostly Christianity and Islam went, except in India. The goddess is still alive in India. Although in my book I claim that there's so much sexism in India because of the colonial influence that a lot of the a goddess focus has been diluted. And poses named after women in yoga were removed during colonial times. Now there's not a single posture in yoga named after a woman. There used to be, postures named after Gargi, and the Lopamudra, Lori will show you Gargi posture. And so when later on this has been named as Virasana, but this is originally Gargi. And then from here you go on to, rabbit and other things. So it's very important to recognize the importance of the goddess. In anthropological terms, the goddess was the antidote to toxic masculinity. And in today's world, one of the problems we're dealing with is toxic masculinity. And the other aspect of the goddess is, even with gods, there's goddess aspects such as in Shiva, who's known as Adi Yogi, or the original yogi. And Shiva was also had an incarnation as half man, half woman, Ardhanarishvara. So that sense of the goddess is very, very important in the yoga tradition. Today, people just say, I have Western students, essentially they're practicing yoga, they say goddess, and goddess in New Age terms is very different from the original goddess poses. And for Vaishnavas, the goddess was either Lakshmi, but for Shaivas it was Durga. And now we come to that part. I want to show a couple of yoga postures quickly. We're running out of time. My apologies. You want to do the neck exercises quickly. So in yoga, we do not do circles with the neck because that's one sure way of damaging your neck. So instead, we do one dimension at a time. For example, take your left palm to the right side of the head, hinge the left ear toward the left side, pull the shoulders back, left elbow back, and stretch the right side of the neck. So we won't do the other side just to save time. The other one is plant the palms on either side of your hips, push the crown head up toward the sky, rotate the head toward the right side, chin power to the right side. So this is the rotation of the cervical part of the spine, just the neck. And then you come back to the center and keep pressing down on the palms, tummy's tight, hinge the head forward, take the chin to your chest, and stretch the back side of the neck. And another concept that's very important to remember is stress containers. So for a lot of people, neck and shoulders and lower back are stress containers. If those are your stress containers, you need to be working on those areas more. The neck, shoulders, lower back, and some people hips, some people even jaw. So so consciously working on the stress containers and loosening them up is also part of stress management through yoga. The other one I wanted to show is beautiful crescent series. So crescent starts with mountain. So in mountain, you're pressing your feet down against the earth and lift the crown and head up toward the sky. And what you're getting there is spinal elongation in mountain. So imagine all the vertebrae and the discs being stretched a little bit in the back. And then from here, inhale the arms up and then hinge to the right side. So this is called Indadalasana, crescent series. And so the left hip is pushed toward the left side. If I take an x-ray of Roy's spine right now, it should show the letter C shape spine. So every vertebrae is bending a little bit to one side. And so that's a side bend. And then the next one I wanted to show is helix. So your arms are downward to the earth, and then plant one left foot to the right of the right foot and rotate the waist to the left side. So now your spine is now, every vertebrae is rotating to the side. And then the other one I wanted to show is back bend. So bring the palms against the either side of the sacrum, fingers pointing down, and then arch back for a back bend. So this is also spinal, energizing or activation, pose. So the important thing to remember, if you can't do any fancy stuff, think of frisbee. Frisbee is forward bends. Can you do a forward bend? So F for forward bend, and then spinal rotation, like she did in helix. So that's spinal rotation. And the B is back bend that she showed. And then the E is elongation, like when you stretch the crown of the head up toward the sky, elongating the spine. And when you integrate these principles of spinal stretching into beautiful series like Anjaneyasana devotion series, some people call this kind of, some ways it kind of bothers me when people call it monkey pose or something. There's beautiful stories behind a lot of these poses. Calling it monkey pose does great injustice. And so here, for example, this is Anjaneyasana. From Anjaneyasana, now let's twist it out to the left side. Yeah. And bring the palms together, bring the palms together, bring it out to the left side, hooking the right elbow against the left knee. So if you look at her back, every vertebrae is kind of rotating. And yeah, maybe you can see this one better. And then another spinal rotation in Anjaneyasana series is when you have your arms downward to the earth, and so heel is lifted up, and then rotate. So this is another spinal rotation at a different angle. You could do it with the knee on the mat also. And then simple spinal things that everybody knows are cat and cow. So Majriyasana and Bilasana. So here in cow, you have maximum dip in the back in a concave shape, looking up at the stars, and then maximum bump in the back in cat. So if you could do a few of these every day to keep the spine nice and healthy, and then sync up, exhalation with one movement and inhalation with the other, that would be great. And I'm trying to see what else we can show. That is, if you could show another integrated posture that integrates many of these principles would be Queen of the Fishes on the ground. So here, some people call this pretzel, but you have tremendous hip joint stretching, and at the same time you're rotating one way. So there's a spinal rotation, spinal elongation. By pushing the crown of the head up toward the sky, it's hard to see. You have to feel it when you elongate your spine, and then so multiple things going on. So for the spine, there's so many different yoga postures and flows that involve that frisbee principle: forward bend, back bends, side bends, rotations, elongation. So if you remember that, that will be, and we will, the goal of yoga to me is at the very least aging gracefully. So I may not, become an Olympic athlete, but at the same time, at my age, all I want to do is age gracefully with a spine that's nice and healthy. As the spine ages, what we notice as the core gives, in a way, then people are not exactly walking, they're breaking their fall with each step. And so you see two 90-year-olds, one with a straight spine and the other one, is going, what is the difference? One took care of his or her spine, the other one didn't. And along with that bending will also come in other, neurological issues, I would think. Okay, so I need to wrap this up for questions. My apologies, I went over quite a bit. The last slide is about mudras, but I will hold that until after the questions. Rama, you're still muted.
Myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wondered if you have any way of sharing what you did in the end of your at the end of your presentation in slow motion so people can follow along with you after this is done. There are a few questions. Mostly people talk about how excellent your visuals have been and how well organized your seminar, this particular webinar has been. So, and people want to know if your slides are available, but it would be a good idea to sort of do this one pose at a time so people can actually follow along with you. Is that possible?
Yeah, if we have time. How are we for time?
Yeah, can you go ahead and show us more slowly what it is you tried to show to get us to do, at least a few of them?
Oh yeah, so let's do, if nothing else, let's do the whole Crescent series as it's known. So Crescent series starts with.
Would you please close the slide, end the slide, so that we can see you full screen?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. And do you see Lori now?
Yes, this is perfect.
Okay. All right. So now let's go. The Crescent series usually integrates a whole spinal stretching. So we will start with inhaling up and then hitch forward at the waist with a straight back, and then separate your feet so that they're hip width apart. And then you can bend your knees and interlace your peace fingers around your big toes. So this is called Padangusthasana, fingers to toes pose. So here, if you notice, we're supposed to, fold forward almost like paper fold. Pardon me? So I hope you can see that forward fold. Eventually, we are able to fold better. Like Lori can, in my case, my tummy gets in the way. So inhale the arms up, and then this time, hinge to the right side. So your hip, your left hip is projected a little bit to the side, and then the spine itself has a curve, and that's a side bend. Imagine every vertebrae bending a little bit to one side. And yoga, that energizes your spine, the side bends. And then in Crescent. So the next one we talked about is when we do back bends, for example. And then spinal rotation in helix. Some people call this corkscrew. So you kind of have the one foot on the other side of the other foot, and then you rotate at the waist. So again, you have spinal rotation going on. And if the feet bother you, and and hurt your balance or something, you could ignore the feet and just do the this spinal rotation. Yeah, just the spinal rotation is good enough. Forget the feet if that's hard. And then you forward fold again, and then separate your feet and bend your knees and insert your palms underneath your feet, and then straighten the knees as much as you can and hinge forward, bend your elbows, and this is called Padahastasana. And so in this single series we have done that frisbee principle: forward bends, back bends, side bends, spinal rotations, and spinal elongation.
RK, we have a couple of questions. Lori seems to be extraordinarily flexible. So for people who are not so flexible and maybe not as thin as Lori, what are some options for how to get started and how to get to the place where Lori and you find yourselves today?
So basically, what my teacher would say is, when you're doing asana or vinyasa, even part of the way, there's benefit to it. So, for example, if I'm doing, for Janu Shirshasana, and if I'm not able to get to it, completely forward, then just do this much, or this much. So basically, the idea is that forward fold that we're happening, and then on this side, for example, you have a lateral hip flexor stretch. So the idea is to at least do a partial thing, and if you cannot get down to the mat, do it in the chair, like in chair yoga. But you make it authentic again when you involve community and when you think good things about other people. Gratitude, when you feel grateful, in yoga tradition, it's very important to feel grateful to our ancestors. And so that ancestral lineage, our parents or grandparents, and so that gratitude is important. And forgiveness is important. You're not supposed to practice yoga where you're filled with hate toward anyone. So anger is okay. That's a distinction that's very important. There's hateful anger and there's righteous anger. Righteous anger is okay. Hateful anger is bad.
Basically.
There was also a question about is yoga the foundation for the development of gymnastics? Are they related in any way, shape, or form?
So good question. A lot of Western gymnastic folks have adopted yoga practices and without even acknowledging that they came from yoga. And so, for example, there's an IP band stretch that we do in yoga. So when you do this, the Western variation is you, instead of keeping the head on the mat and then bringing the knees to you, I'm trying to remember the variation. The Western gym variation is just basically pulling the knee to you and then the head up, and so they're connected. A lot of yoga practices have been incorporated into gymnastics, but yoga, of course, makes gymnastics by depending on what you believe in, by a few hundred years or a few thousand years. And I think Venki had a question about what time of day is best to practice yoga. And any time of day is good. In fact, some yoga poses, for example, there's one yoga posture called Paschimottanasana, which is westward leaning stance. So this is Paschimottanasana, and you're supposed to be practicing with the sun setting on your back. And again, in modern times, we cannot, follow all those rules. So we still have benefit, no matter what time of the day you can do it. I personally feel more energy early in the mornings, but at the same time, when I teach classes, I know that most of my students are available in the evenings. So I just have to make time for it.
There's a couple more questions that came in. Are there any books you would recommend for visual learners or meditation, videos, or have you put together any such thing for people to follow?
Unfortunately, there are books like Iyengar's, books that you can find, that are, very good. Light on Yoga is B.K. Iyengar book, which is really good. So there's some books good like that, but at the same time, in terms of, in terms of kind of creating a comprehensive approach that's also partly, scientific or medical, I think you'll have to wait for my book and Lawrence. Just kidding.
A question of, are yoga and Tai Chi related, and are yoga and meditation connected in some way?
You want to answer that?
Well, Tai Chi has definite ancient roots as well. And I think it's just the cultural traditions are distinct lineages. But Tai Chi is also very much a meditative movement art as well. So Qigong is another one that's in there, but very, very much akin to Tai Chi from my understanding, and I'm certainly no expert. But these are just ancient arts of movement and meditation that have been, have evolved, but have been lost along the way and are getting resurgence as we understand how important the mind and the body connection is. We've been so reductionistic and so, science over here and faith over here, but now we understand it takes both, and this blends these, bringing back these rich traditions that help us to stay connected, mind and body. Meditation is part of both, I would say.
And another question on how long must one practice yoga in order to start to experience benefit on a daily basis? Is there a time slot, a 15, 10 hour?
Say, at least about 5 to 15 minutes a day if you could do it, or maybe half an hour every other day, or maybe 1 hour every 3 days or something. So this way, some studies have linked muscle memory to yoga. And so if you don't do yoga for 2 weeks, your muscles may need to be re-educated. So that's why yoga is a discipline. It is not just something you do and say, done that and got my t-shirt, but rather you have to keep doing it for the rest. I'll keep doing it until my dying day.
Even if we can't do the Kriya part, we're doing mindfulness, we're doing meditation,
Yes.
We're taking 3 breaths and being there in your body, embodied breathing is in a sense yoga as well. So just incorporating that in our lifestyle, even if we don't have time to do 10 linked different poses or several different flow series, we can bend, we can twist, we can breathe as we do those positions, and we can sprinkle them throughout the day, I would suggest.
Okay, we have another question. What would you recommend as postures for people older than 70 years of age so that they can avoid injuring themselves, and can flexibility be developed with Padmasana?
Yeah, we have one 85-year-old who is a regular to our practice. So what I tell people is do not get sucked into the Western mindset of fitness. So don't try to bring a Western mindset to an Eastern practice. You need to bring an Eastern mindset to an Eastern practice, which is flow into it, do as much as you can, and then as we get older, modify our yoga practice and see what you can do. Again, it's hard to come up with rules saying 70-year-olds, every 70-year-old is different. Some 70-year-olds can bend forward and touch their toes. Some, can't. And so flexibility and strength and balance. So flexibility, strength, and balance are the three foundations of at least the physical part of yoga. And on all those three aspects, each and every one of us, over 60 is very different. So that's why we need to do what we can and then find a good teacher who will teach you the importance of not bringing that fitness mentality where you say, oh, I can't do it. In that case, I'm going to find something else, such as watch TV or something. Encourage you to be your cheerleader. And we tell our folks in our class that there are three teachers or three coaches in this class, and they are your body, mind, and spirit. The rest of us are just your cheerleaders. You need to listen to them, not us. And the body and mind and spirit will teach you.
And are there any dietary recommendations for best yoga outcomes? We have that as a question from one of our members.
That's a great question, and Ayurvedic traditions have a lot of customized dietary recommendations depending on your doshas, and I think a healthful diet that's rich in plant foods, maybe not exclusively vegetarian, but I think that there are some definite benefits to minimizing animal products, particularly for inflammatory processes, meaning processes that are degenerative in the body that cause breakdown of tissues. So a very rich plant-based diet, for the most part, I think is very fitting with yoga. Basically, taking care of the body as a vessel of something that you want to take with you into the future, and not just mistreat when you're young because you can get away with it.
Usually, a lot of the Asian herbs have medicinal value, and a diet that's rich in turmeric and cumin. Turmeric has anti-inflammatory properties, and so it's very important to kind of keep those herbs going and then not eat too much as we get older is also important.
Yeah, definitely minimizing sugar. So that's something we definitely know is inflammatory. It promotes the metabolic imbalances that lead to diabetes and the pre-diabetes that we're trying to prevent diabetes if we can get ahead of it. And so those are all wisdom traditions, and practicing that by taking care of our bodies, I think, is a very yogic principle.
Well, it is 9:15. I thank my audience of attendees for being patient and staying glued to the screen. I thank you both very much for what you have brought today. Clearly, it's a testament to your presentation that the audience has continued to stay engaged. We haven't lost any participants. So I thank you very much for taking the time to be part of the Red Sari webinar series. And I really appreciate what you have done today to help us, to help ourselves, especially at a time when COVID-19 has pretty much put a dent in our psyches, not to mention our bodies. And I think a lot of people have stayed home and eaten a lot. So it's time to detoxify with some of the techniques you provided as helping guidelines for us today. In concluding this webinar, I would ask you to please tell us anything else that you would like us to take home tonight and use going forward as we try to navigate our way to better health and wellness.
Go ahead. I would say, basically, again, it all starts with your heart. Fill your heart with the right, feelings, and then follow it up with the right action, and then yoga flows from that. And yoga, like we talked about, is a form of dance in many ways. And my teacher would say dance begins in your heart. And the feet may or may not join that dance, but the heart needs to be, one with the universe. So that sense of lightness of the heart brings smoothness to your movement. So before you could, do any kind of like Lori did, any kind of smooth movement, where in Anjaneyasana you're doing the twist. Before you could do that, you need to feel light in your heart, and essentially that lightness will spread to your feet. So be joyful is what for me, I lost my father when I was 2.5 years old. So ever since then, it's been one tragedy after another. And for me, joy is the most important or most elusive thing to reach for. I'm sometimes very jealous of or envious of people who are happy, joyful. So that sense of joy, it doesn't take much money to smile. So and yoga is, smile is a connection, yoga means connection.
All right, one last question that just came in. Surya Namaskar. Is that beneficial to do as a standalone yoga practice if that's all you can do? And what are its benefits? Do you demonstrate and explain its benefits? And thank you again for your fantastic presentation and demonstration. And on behalf of Red Sari, we'd like to thank everyone for your support as well as your the following that we've developed that is loyal and continues to attend and participate in these bi-weekly seminar series. So thank you to everyone who has made these webinars possible, and especially to Shakti, our CEO, and to Lata, our secretary, who helped me bring this program together as a first from Cincinnati's Red Sari group. So thank you, everyone. And go ahead and please answer the question.
Surya Namaskar.
Surya Namaskar has withstood the test of time as the single most popular yoga vinyasa of all the ones that there are. You saw a whole menu of it, and essentially it incorporates a lot of spinal workout, and at the same time, muscles and of course tendons, ligaments, and joints are all used. So you would inhale the arms up, forward fold at the waist, and then step or float back into plank. So plank is great for a core strength, and then lower down to Chaturanga Dandasana, yoga push-up. Your knees could be on the mat for cobra or off the mat for up dog, and then you arch back and then push the hips back and up for down dog, and so you try to get that upside down V shaping down dog, and then step forward and come back up. And so, and that's a simple thing. One of the most simple series in yoga, and has many of the benefits of yoga incorporated into it.
Do we step forward too at some point?
Yeah, step or forward.
Somewhere.
And then there's some salutation A, where you're going to Justice 1, as we call it. Some people call this Warrior 1. Justice is a better translation. And so that's sun salutation B, as it's called. And so both, sun salutation A and B are excellent for spinal strength, and also, also your leg muscles are used really well. So please, if nothing else, sun salutation is a great series.
Okay, I'd like to also tell the audience tonight that Red Sari Cincinnati puts out a quarterly newsletter, and both Lori and RK are participating in the upcoming fall edition of our newsletter. So please be sure to read the newsletter when we publish it shortly. It'll hopefully be available to you next week. And you can find out more about what RK is doing and how he came to do what he's doing as well. So thank you again, RK and Lori. And we really appreciate your participation tonight to help further the mission of Red Sari, which is to give us our the tools as South Asians to further our wellness and our health. So thank you, and thank you to everybody who participated tonight. Good night, and I hope you can use this to your benefit. Thanks
Thanks,
again.
Dr. Rama.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.